Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time, Masechet Bava Metzia. Today is our 10th class, and we will be discussing or reviewing Daf 64 through 70. We have a lot to do today, and we are continuing to discuss the concept of rebit, of interest, and how it affects business practices, business deals, investments, loans, sales. So that is what we are going to continue to discuss today. So on DAF 64, last week we actually ended with a case that, let's say you borrow small change from a person, and when you get that pile of small change, you find that there are extra coins, then not that ones that you didn't expect to be there. So the question is, if it's a mistake, so then you have to return it. Meaning if it's a lot of coins, or if it's clear that the person gave you too much, then you have to return it. But if it's a few coins, so then we assume that, oh, the person just gave you a few extra shekel because, it was in his pocket. So the Gemara says, what's the case here? How do I know when it was a mistake and when it was a gift? So the Gemara on Daf 64 tells us that we're dealing with a place or a situation where the person was counting in fives or tens, right? So here's 20, 25, 30, 35. So if there's an extra 5 or 10, you know that it was a mistake because they gave you too much. But if there's an extra 3 coins or 7 coins, right, not in denominations of 5 or 10, so then you can assume that this was intentional and it is a gift. However, if you know this person would never give you a gift, so then maybe the case is that he took the money from you, or maybe stole the money from you, and this is how he's returning it, like he's slipping it in. So then you could keep it. Okay, the next case is you paid a farmer for a gourd, right? Some sort of maybe pumpkin or squash, right? This gourd, and you paid for a small one. And then he says, you know what? I'll give you, instead of giving it to you today, I'll give it to you in a week, and I'll give you a bigger one, right? A larger gourd. So now, again, the question is, you paid for a small one. If you get a bigger one, that looks like interest, right? You paid for X, you're getting X plus an extra week. So the Gemara tells us that if the farmer had a bigger one in stock now, then that's fine, meaning he's accepting the payment instead of for a smaller one for a bigger one, and he says he'll give it to you next week. Now we know small ones are going to grow bigger, so maybe you don't even need the larger one in stock. You can say, oh, this one is going to be larger, and it'll be larger in a week, so then it's fine. The Gemara says, no, you actually need the larger ones in stock at this time. And we're going to see this a few times, that if you make a business deal where the purchaser pays now, but is only going to get something later, we're going to say that the item has to have been in stock at the time of purchase. Therefore, even if you're getting it later, it's as if you bought it now already. If the person did not have it in stock, so now it looks like interest or is interest. So we'll see this as we continue. Next, a person sells milk that is going to come out of his goat, right? The goat every day is milked. There's milk every day in the goat. So now, if the person says, right, I'm going to sell you all the milk that comes out of this goat, so then that's okay. Because even though you're selling something that will be coming in the future, we know that every day the goat produces milk. But if you say, I'm going to sell you, right, 2 liters of milk, that's not okay, because 2 liters of milk don't exist right now. So you can't sell that. The same thing with sheep and their wool, and bees and honey. If you don't have it right now, then you cannot sell something like what we would call futures, if it doesn't exist at the moment. Okay, again, okay, so again, like if we make a distinction between the gourd and the milk case, the gourd is there and you just leave it alone, it'll get bigger with time, but the milk hasn't, right, doesn't come on its own, right? Every day, new milk is going to be produced, right? So it's new milk. It's not this, right? The gourd is just going to grow bigger, but milk is new milk every day, and therefore it is different. It's a different case. Okay, next case. A person says, take 4 zuz, right? I'm giving you 4 zuz, and I want you to deliver this barrel of wine to me next week. And then you say, if it spoils, so then I don't want it, right? Then the sale is void. And if it goes up or down in value, I'll take the hit, right? Meaning the buyer is saying, if it goes up and down in value, I'll take the difference, whether it's a profit or a loss. So the Gemara says this is fine. Why? Because again, the buyer, and we'll see this also as we continue, the Gemara calls it the buyer is closer to gaining, meaning all the loss is really on the seller, right? Because it says if it's going to spoil, it's all on the seller. And the buyer is, again, it might go up in value, so he'll gain, and it might stay. And if it goes down, so there's a slight possibility that this is going to happen. But right, again, because he might lose, so we say that it's like a sale. And therefore it is okay. Again, interest on a loan is forbidden. On a sale, it's a little bit more of a gray area. Okay, the next Mishnah tells us a person lends another person money, right? So Reuven lends Shimon money. So he can't live. So wait, Reuven lent Shimon money. So now Shimon is not allowed to live in Reuven's courtyard for free because, right, or to rent it out at a lower value because this is ribit, meaning the buyer is, right, the lender, we have a lender and a borrower. So the borrower owes the lender a certain amount of money. If he now gets benefit from the lender, so now it's as if there's extra gain, right? So because there's extra gain, then it would be as if, right, he's getting rebate, he's getting extra gain, right? Interest is extra gain. Okay, so then the question is, maybe only if the courtyard is usually rented out. So then it's a real gain. But maybe if it's an empty chatzer, an empty courtyard, it would be okay. Gemara says, sorry, maybe it would not be okay. Sorry, maybe it would be okay. Because again, it's not extra gain. He wouldn't have been renting it out anyway. Let's say someone says, right, so now it's right, lend me money and sorry. The original case is that the courtyard is Shimon's, right? Shimon is letting Reuven stay in the courtyard, right? Again, the lender is staying in the borrower's courtyard. So again, he's benefiting. So now, if you say beforehand, lend me money and I'll let you live in my courtyard, so then it's prearranged. So then you can do it and you have to pay rent. But if he lives there after he lends him money, so then he doesn't have to pay rent and it doesn't look like rebate, right? It doesn't look like rebate because the loan already happened, right? The loan was already given, whatever was arranged. And now he's saying, by the way, if you want, you can stay by me. So that's not connected to the loan, and therefore it doesn't look like interest. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chama used to use the slaves of other people who owed him money. right? So a person would owe him money, so he would take his slave and use him to work for him, but only when they didn't have work to do from their master, right? On their day off, right? And not only that, but he would feed them. So, right, so even though later he would get back the full loan payment, we say this is not rebate, this is not interest, because, says the Gemara, this is for the good of the owner of the slave, because, and we have seen this before, right, the owner of the slave doesn't want the slave to have a day off, right? They might become lazy, but maybe, right, he's feeding him, so he's taking away some of the pressure. On the other hand, it does look like interest because he's having the slave work for him, and then the borrower is going to pay him back the full amount. So he actually retracted this practice and he stopped doing it. We're now on Daf 65, and we're going to see different practices that different people used to do, and we're going to discuss if it does look like interest or it doesn't, right? Would it be okay or would it not be okay? Again, we mentioned this, I think, last time, right? There's always going to be this tension between, I know that there's a prohibition from charging interest. On the other hand, I need to make a living, right? In order to make a living, I need to charge something, right? I need to make money. So how am I going to make money if I can't charge interest? So we'll see different business practices that are trying to deal with this tension between charging, the prohibition of charging interest and common business practice. Okay, so Daf 65 tells us that if you owe interest to someone and then the price of wheat goes up, so now you pay 5, right? Let's say 5 kilo of wheat instead of 4. So then now we know you're not allowed to pay interest. So if you pay interest, the court will take the interest away. So the question is, you owed the person interest and you owed, right, you owed 4. Now 4 was with interest. Now, but the price went up, so you ended up giving 5. So how much of that is the interest, right? So one opinion is you take away 4 from the lender, right, and not 5. 5 is seen as like bonus, the 5th, right? But you take away 4 kilos because that was the original interest. Or no, you take away 5 because all 5 kilos are seen as the interest that you paid. Let's say you gave a coat to a person instead of cash for the interest that you owed the person. You take away the cash value of the coat, but not the coat itself. Or again, another opinion is that you actually take the coat away. If the lender accepts less value than the prearranged interest that he was going to charge you, you recover the original amount that they agreed upon, or no, you take away the lower value. Meaning, as soon as you charge someone interest or agree upon interest, that is when it becomes prohibited. So if that is the case, again, the question is, do you take back the original amount or the lower amount? I think I saw a hand. If you have a question, you can put it in the chat box. I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay, the next Mishnah tells us that you can increase payment for delayed rent, but not for a sale. Okay, again, business practices, right? If I say you have to pay more if you don't pay me now, right? If you pay me at the end of the month, you have to pay more. Is that seen as I'm charging interest? The Gemara says it's not for a rental agreement, but it is for a sale. And the Gemara is going to explain this, right? So again, the Mishnah actually says, right, if a person says, if you pay up front, it's going to be cheaper, right? Then paying at the end of the month, or if you pay every month, right? We have this in Israel. I don't know if in America, but let's say if you have to pay certain taxes, right? If you pay upfront in January, it's cheaper than if you pay every month what you're scheduled to pay, right? So is that seen as interest? Meaning, if I'm paying more every month, I'm actually paying more than you're telling me that I owe you. That is called interest. So again, if the person says that if you pay up front, it'll be cheaper rent than paying every month, that is okay. That is not seen as interest, because you're saying really rent is $2,000 a month, but if you pay me up front, I'll make it cheaper, right? That's not interest. I'm giving you a discount, right? As opposed to saying it costs 2,000, but if you pay me at the end of the month, I'm going to charge you 2,500, right? That's increasing the amount. The Mishnah continues, if you're selling a field, right? Now this is selling a field, this is not a rental agreement. If you sell a field and you say, pay me now, it'll be cheaper, but if you pay me later, it's going to be more, that is not okay, because now you're charging more because of the delayed payment, right? As I said, right? If the rent is 2,000 and I say, if you pay me at the end of the month, I'm going to charge you 2,500, that's seen as interest. So now the Gemara is going to say, wait a minute, why? What's the difference, right? So the Gemara says, when it's rent, so really you only need to pay at the end of the month. So if you pay early, so I'm giving you a discount of the regular price. And that's okay. You're allowed to lower the price of something, but with a sale, right? When you buy something, you need to pay for it now. If you pay for it later, that's I'm increasing the price for the delayed payment, and therefore that is rebate, that is interest. The Aramaic term for this is agar natar, right? That there you're paying for delayed payment, and that is seen as interest. Okay, now we're going to see different practices that people did, and are they interest or not? So there's something called a tarsha. A tarsha. So here the Gemara says it's okay, though next up we're going to say that it's not okay. Well, we'll see. So here the Gemara says a tarsha is okay. What is that? What's a tarsha? Right. So a person says, right, it's not that there are two different prices, but he says to him, the rent is 2,500 at the end of the month, right? So then if you want to pay now, you can pay me 2,000, right? So what did you do here? You quote the higher price. That's the actual price, as if. And now if you pay me earlier, so then it is a cheap, right? I'm giving you a discount, and therefore it doesn't look like interest. Rav Papa, you know how when we say in the Hadrans, in the ceremony, when we finish a Masechet, there are a lot of papas, right? Rafram Bar Papa, Sorchav Bar Papa, we mention all the papas. One opinion is it's because they were the beer makers and you wanted to invite them to every party because they brought the beer. So the Gemara here on Daf 65 tells us that Rav Papa, right, he was a beer manufacturer. Now, you start making beer. This is great for this time of year, right? You start making beer in Nisan, right? Nisan is when the barley grows. So that's when you start making beer. But we all know that it takes time for it to ferment, and it's much better in Tishrei, right? In the autumn, in the fall. So, and it would also be much more expensive because it was better. So what would Rav Papa do? He would sell his beer in Nisan, meaning in the spring, at Tishrei prices at the higher price, because people wanted beer now. And he's like, listen, I don't need to sell it to you. I can wait till the fall. I'll charge you double. But if you want it now, so then you have to pay me at the expensive rate. Right. So he says, look, I don't need to sell it. I'm very rich. He was very rich. Right? I don't need to sell it. You want me to sell it to you? Okay, so I'm selling it to you at a higher price. So it's as if he's like doing them a favor by selling it now to them. We'll see if what the halacha thinks about this in a minute. Okay, Rav Chama, he used to give merchandise to a person to go sell in another city. And he said, I'm going to take responsibility for all the merchandise, whatever happens to it. And then they would go and sell it. And then they'd come back and they'd pay him with whatever profit they had, right, after they sold it. So here we see this is not rebate. And the note in the Gemara says this is actually the source for what's called the heter iska. This is something that Zohar mentioned last week. There is a rabbinic I don't want to use the word loophole, a rabbinic solution to people who want to go into business, right? Investing, loaning, who want to, provision, that's a good word, Zohar, thank you. Right, so the rabbis wanted to make sure that people do go into business, that people do invest, that people do loan money, but again, those people want to make money, so how are they going to do it? So they came up with this idea of heter iska, which means that iska is a business deal, right? And we want to facilitate business deals. So what are we going to say? That the money is advanced. It's not a loan, it's advanced. And the borrower is seen as the agent of the lender, right? I want you to take all of these shirts and I want you to go sell them in another city. So I'm not lending you money. We're in business together, right? I'm giving you the merchandise. You go and sell it, and then, right? And again, the manufacturer or the investor is taking responsibility. We're going to see later on different business dealings who takes responsibility and when. But if he takes responsibility, so then it's seen as a deposit and not a loan, and therefore the recipient can receive and therefore he'll get the profit, his share in the profit. Now it's important to recognize that the recipient, the managing partner, the person who's taking the clothing to the next city, he has to receive a fee for his service. And we're going to talk more about that as we continue. Okay, next Mishnah. A person bought a field and paid partially, right? A down payment, we would say. And then the sale was conditional on full payment. So now this is not permitted because what's happening? Who's eating the produce in the middle? Meaning, if I put down a down payment, did I buy the field or did I not buy the field? Did I buy part of the field or did I not buy anything, right? That's going to be our machloket. We don't know who gets to eat the fruit that's in the field right now, right? And if either one of them eat it, it's interest because you're getting, right? You're benefiting from this sale and it's not part of the sale price. So who gets to eat from it? Another case, you lend money for a field. If you don't pay at the end, if you don't pay at the end, the field becomes mine, says the lender. So, and if it's the field is not the value of the loan, so then it's not okay because you lent a certain amount of money and you're going to receive much more than what you lent. So that is forbidden. Okay, so now the Gemara explains. Right, so who can eat the fruit? Remember we said you partially pay for the land. Who can eat the fruit? So one opinion is the seller is allowed to eat the fruit because the buyer didn't fully buy the land. Or maybe you have to give the produce to a third party because no one, right, the seller sold it already, but the buyer didn't buy it yet. So we give it to a third party. So the Gemara explains, both can have the produce when he acquires what he paid for already, right? So let's say the land is worth 1,000, right? And he pays 500. So one could say he acquired half the land already, right? You paid for half. So one could say he bought half the land. So half of the produce is his and half of the produce is the seller's. Or again, or maybe neither of them can eat it because he hasn't acquired anything, right? So again, he sold the land, but no one bought it yet. Or maybe the seller, right? Again, we're going to do all the possibilities, right? Maybe the seller can eat all of the produce because maybe the buyer doesn't have the right till he pays in full. That's the only time you get the rights to the land. Or maybe the buyer can have all of the fruit because when you put down a down payment, it's yours already. Yeah, you didn't give all the money, but you bought it. So now I get to eat from everything in the field. Okay, so right, let's say you borrowed 100 and you gave the field as collateral, but the field is a value of 500, right? Much more than what you borrowed. So the lender says, if you sell the field, so then, or if you want to sell the field, you have to sell it to me for 100 and maybe a little bit more, right? Because you owe me 100. So you'll give it to me for 100 plus like a little bit more. That's not okay. That's rebate, that's interest, that's not okay. If you buy it for 500, so then it's okay, meaning if the lender buys the land for the value of the land, then obviously that is okay. Dot 66, a person bought land without achrayut. Achrayut means like a warranty, right? So sometimes you can go into a business deal where people take upon themselves achrayut, responsibility if something goes wrong, right? So, right, full back, money back guarantee, right? Let's say a person bought land without a money back guarantee, right? And then the seller told him that if the land gets seized by a creditor, so then he'll give him better land and he'll even pay for his expenses. So the question is, did the seller really mean what he was saying or not, right? Is this a binding statement? Did he really mean it? Or was he just saying like, I'll give you whatever you want, don't worry about it, but not real, right? He didn't mean it, right? So maybe if the seller initiates it, so it's not serious because really the buyer should have said it, right? The buyer should say, I want warranty on this land that I'm buying. If not, if he doesn't say it, so if the seller says it, we don't take it seriously. Okay, the next, okay, so then the Gemara tells us we do take a statement seriously if it's given before the money changed hands. But if you say it after the sale, so then we don't take it seriously because you're just like trying to like make nice. Or maybe, yes, we do take it seriously even after the sale, because again, you want it all to be good. And again, here we have an Aramaic question, machloket. The term is an asmachta. Asmachta means a reliance. Do I, if someone is trying to convince me or make me feel better, do I take it seriously or not? So the machloket is asmachta. Kanya, is it, do we take it at face value and it's a binding agreement, or lo kanya? It's not a binding, it's not a binding statement. He's just trying to make you feel better that you just bought land without any warranty, but we don't take him seriously. Let's say the loan is for 3 years. At the end of 3 years, the person didn't pay back the loan. So now the land becomes the lender's. So this shows that the asmachta does work, right? Meaning he said that you can have this land at the end of 3 years. Or, right, if the borrower tells the lender within 3 years, right, let's say he comes and he wants to acquire the land already. Sorry, the borrower owes money to the lender, right? The lender lent him money. The borrower said, I'll pay it back in 3 years. If in the middle, right, after a year and a half, the borrower comes to the lender and says, you know what, I invested the money. I thought I was going to be a millionaire. It turns out everything fell apart. You might as well just take this land because there's no way I'm going to be able to pay you back. So the question is, do we take that seriously? And it's valid. So the question is, when does he say it, right? If he says it at the end of 3 years, so maybe it's not serious, because maybe he's just trying to stall so he can make more money and then he'll go back and give the money. Or maybe even within the 3 years, he's not serious and it's also not valid. Again, how serious do we take these statements? If it comes to the last day of the loan, and we see the borrower, and literally the Gemara says this. It's like such a crazy thing, right? The Gemara says, if you see the borrower sitting in a bar and drinking, so you see he's not very serious about paying back the loan, and therefore you can take the field, right? If you see him running around trying to find money, right? So then you don't acquire the field because you see he's really trying to pay you back. Right? Or the Gemara says, no, right? A little psychology here. The Gemara says, not necessarily. Just because he's sitting in a bar doesn't mean on the inside he's not stressed, right? Maybe he's so stressed he was trying to find the money, but he couldn't, and he decides he's just going to go drink, right? It doesn't prove if you can take the field or not. And I thought it was very sharp of the rabbis to understand, right, psychology, that people can go to a bar to relax, and they can go there because they're stressed. Okay. Again, let's say land is sold with a warranty, and then the land is seized. Remember, if there's a creditor, there was another loan, the land is taken. So then the court will go back to the seller and take out another field, to repay the buyer who bought the land with a warranty. Warranty means that if I pay for this land, if it gets taken, I get another plot of land. Okay, Daf 67 speaks about a woman who tells an agent to buy land from her family, right? She has money. She says, I want you to go to my parents' village over there and buy some land. And then the seller, right? So the agent goes to the family, and the seller, the family member, says, oh, if I get money, so so I want my land back, right? Meaning, like, I've fallen on hard times. I'll sell you this land. But if I get more money, I want the rights to be able to buy it back. And the agent says, listen, you're relatives with the woman, so you guys figure it out. So the Gemara says, did the agent agree or not agree? Like, what just happened here, right? Did the agent agree to the condition of the sale or not? So, excuse me. It seems that the agent is agreeing to this stipulation, to the t'nai. T'nai means that there's a stipulation in the sale agreement, and he seems to be agreeing, right? However, this looks like interest, because I'm saying that you can come back and buy back the land, but that's not, right? Again, where's the interest? What happens with the produce that's on the land, right? Does that need to be returned? Does it not be returned? And that would be interest. Let's say the field was collateral for a loan. So, and then during right, again, you borrow money for 3 years. The lender gets the use of the field. So now the lender is eating the produce of the field. So he does not need to return the produce because it wasn't prearranged. There was no discussion about that. So in the meantime, he can eat from the field. Sometimes the borrower can pay back the loan early and evict the lender from the land, right? Again, person takes out a loan for 1,000 shekel. He gives this field to the lender and he says it's a 3-year loan. Let's say he does really well in business and in a year and a half, he wants to come back and take back his property, right? So the Gemara says he can do that. But again, what about the produce? So if the lender ate the produce and it was the value of the loan, so then the borrower can come and evict him and say, listen, you just ate 1,000 shekel worth of apples, right? Of wheat, of whatever it is. So now that's it, get back, get out. Right? If he ate more, so now he does not need to pay back. But it does look a little bit like interest because it seems like he's getting more than he lent. And we don't say that it's the value of, right? You can't say, oh, and by the way, you owe me another, right? You also took out another loan, so I ate the value of that other loan. You're not allowed to do that. However, for orphans, we do allow this to be done, meaning, and we have seen this before, that the halacha, the Jewish law, is very careful to protect orphans. We want to make sure that they don't lose any money. We want to make sure that they're taken care of. So we're going to see that there are certain special dispensations for orphans and their money. Okay, let's continue on daf 67. You can only evict the lender if you give him some money, even if he ate the produce that was the value of the loan. And the lender can only eat the produce if it was prearranged that he's going to be eating the produce, right? This is called, there are two terms. One is that there's a prearranged reduction in how much you have to pay back because the lender is eating the produce. That's called nichiyata, as opposed to kitsuta, which is a limitation on benefits. And there's a machloket if these things are okay, right? So let's say you say, for the first 5 years, I'm going to eat anything that I want from the field. And after that, you can get all the produce that's on the property. So this is a prearranged deal. So that's one option. Another option is you say, the first 5 years, I'm going to eat and I'm going to reduce the amount that you owe me every year based on, right, what I'm eating. So the question is, are you allowed to do these things or not? There was this agreement that people used to do, and they used to write in the document, right? And but this was more like a sale than a loan, and therefore it was okay. Okay, next, in a place where, now remember we were talking about, can you evict the lender earlier than when you're supposed to pay back the loan? So apparently there were different customs in different places. So in a place where you can evict the lender by paying the loan back early, a creditor can't come and take the land because it's not seen as the lender's land. Meaning, if at any moment the borrower can come back and take back his land, we see that the land is not really the lender's. It's still the borrower's. If you can't pay early, so then the land is seen as the lender's land, and therefore all the ramifications of it being the lender's land apply to that. Also, right, let's say he comes and he says, okay, here's the money I owe you, now get off my land. The lender is not allowed to now take a knapsack and be like, okay, I'm taking all these apples with me on my way out. But if the apples are already in his basket, he is allowed to take it with him as he's leaving. Again, in this type of place, you can say, you can't send me out early, right? Again, if you make an agreement, right, that you're not allowed to pay back the loan early, that's valid if that was said before you even started, right? Let's say they say, I'm going to get you, right? The person says to him, wait right here. I'm just going over there to the ATM. I'm going to get money to pay you. So then, and he says, stop taking apples, right? I'm about to pay you back. Like, stop eating all my apples. That's okay, because he says, I'm just going to the ATM to get you the money. Don't leave and don't eat anymore. Okay. Next, Daf 68 tells us that okay, let's say you said, all right, I'm borrowing money. Here's my land, and I don't say anything about, can I come back and pay it early? Can I not come back and pay it early? So if you don't say anything, so then the lender has at least a year to eat from the land before the borrower can come and pay back the loan, right? Meaning there's a minimum understanding that when the lender is lending out the money, he gets to eat the produce for at least a year. And after that, right, after that, it's okay. He can come and take it. And not only that, but the lender has certain rights to the land, meaning, let's say the borrower decides he wants to sell the land. So the lender has first rights to buy the land, meaning this is called a bar mitzvah, right? That there's a law that says if I want to sell a land, the neighbor the person who owns the land next to me should have the right of refusal, basically, right? So because it makes sense, right? If I own certain plots of land, I would much rather buy a plot next to my field, right? So I can plow the whole field together, right? Or I want to buy a house next to the one that I own, right? So in this case, the lender becomes what's called what seems to be the neighbor, right? And the Gemara, it's a beautiful play on word, right? The land is called a mashkanta, which literally means like a mortgage, right? But the word has the word a shachen in it, right? A shachen is your neighbor, meaning the lender becomes the neighbor to the borrower. So if the borrower wants to sell the land, the lender has the opportunity to buy it first. Okay. Fine. Now the Gemara tells us that you are not allowed to do the tarsha of Rav Papa that we spoke about before, meaning you can't sell an item at a higher price, right? That's later, right? Because that's not fair. Right now, that's not the market value. And the law also is that you're not allowed to do what's called a half investment, half a loan. So here is the case, and we're going to see it in the Mishnah, but the case is that an investor gives an agent money or an item, and the agent is now going to either invest the money or sell the item. So the agent accepts to pay back half of the principal of value if anything happens to the principal, right? So if there's an accident and everything gets lost, so the agent takes responsibility for half of it. If it's not lost, so then they split the profits. This was called the document of Mechoza. So the Gemara says you're not allowed to do this because we don't know if there's going to be profit. And therefore, it's not okay. It looks like it's a loan. It doesn't look like it's just a deposit, and therefore it is not okay. Actually, here, like as an aside, there's a discussion here, like really like as a tangent, one of the rabbis says, right, well, wait a minute, my father does this. And the other guy says, well, your father was a great man, and for sure he must have meant something else. But what happens if your father dies and then you just have the document and you're not going to, right, the children are not going to know what he really meant. And unfortunately, like the next day, the father dies. And here the Gemara says you have to be. We have a saying in Hebrew: "Al tiftach peh l'satan." Right? Don't open your mouth. I don't know how to say it in English. Like don't tempt fate, maybe is what you might say, right? Don't say, well, what if he dies? No. Don't say that. Because we see that he really did die the next day. So speech is very important, and be careful with what we say. Okay. Next. Okay. We're talking about things you're not allowed to do. So you're also not allowed to do what we did in a place called Narash, where they would get a collateral and then they would lease it back to them. And then if the borrower keeps it a while, so then he can lease it back. So that, again, they said this, you could do that if he keeps it and then he leases it back. Again, we want to make sure that there are people who are doing business and lending things to other people. Okay, next Mishnah, we have a lot to do. A storekeeper who invests for another person has to be paid, right, a wage. And this is what we were saying, right? It's not enough to just give the person half the profits. They also need to get a wage. And if they don't, it's seen as interest. Let's say, right, the same as if a person like incubates eggs from a chicken, they get half the profits plus expenses and a wage. Now, if you don't have any responsibility to the item, so then it's okay to just get half the profits and you don't need to get a wage. Okay, so now the Gemara says, it's not interest if you get paid the wage, right? Because it shows that it's a business deal and not a loan. And you have to pay, you can just pay the lowest wage. You don't have to pay a lot. And you can give the person produce or money. It's all, again, in either case, the person needs to get a wage. Okay, now let's say you gave a person an animal as an investment, right? You gave it to the shepherd. So you can't give him like goats or sheep because all they do is just eat. So again, or maybe you can, because you can say to the shepherd, oh, you can milk the goats and keep the milk, or you can shear the wool and you can keep that, and that could be your wage. Again, you have to pay the shepherd to raise animals. Also talks about young animals, right? If you have very young animals, you have to actually carry them to the pasture. So therefore you have to pay him more because he's actually carrying the animals. Okay, let's say a document said that there was a partnership that was half profit, half losses. We talked about that, well, a little bit differently here, but no fee to the managing partner. So we say, again, it looks like interest. And the Gemara says, no, this is really what it meant. You can either get half of the profits, but then the investor makes, right? If you take half the profits, the investor becomes liable for 2/3 of the losses, or, right, Daf 69 tells us you can be liable for half of the losses, and then you get 2/3 of the profit, meaning the extra profit are going to be your wage, and that is okay. Again, so we have an investor and a managing partner. Right, so the investor puts up the capital, and the managing partner is doing all the work, and then they share the profits. Right, so if the investor says all the profits over 1/3 of the investment are your wage, that's okay, that works. Or no, he has to give him at least a dinar, even if, right, if the venture isn't profitable at all. Again, right, as we said, the manager has to get a wage, even if at the end, right, the startup goes bankrupt. If the manager invests money as well, so then he doesn't get a wage because now he's an investor. And then he gets his share of the profits, right? He becomes a partner, and then that is okay. He doesn't have to get a wage. Let's say a person gives donkeys to the shepherd or the herdsman to fatten it up. So the minimum time is 18 months. And then at the end of that, they divide the profits, and each animal is like a different length of time, right? Again, there's more effort to raise animals in the second year because they eat more. But you're not allowed to terminate the relationship, the partnership early, right? And then how long, again, animals have offspring. So you have to care for them at least 30 days or 50 days, and then you can sell them and split the profits. Maybe if you keep them longer, you get more of the profits. Let's say you have partners, right? One partner can take his share of the profit without telling the other profit, right? Again, when the business deal, right, if you said that you're investing for 3 years, at the end of those 3 years, you can do whatever you want with your share of the profit, but you can't take the produce, right? So your share of the produce, right? So in the case of wine, you can't take barrels of wine without telling the partner, right? But money is seen as if it's already divided. So you can go to the joint bank account and take out your half of the money. Okay. So here we have the case of Rav Chama, who would lend out a zuz and charge a fee, but he was punished because it was interest. And the Gemara says it's not like renting an item and charging a fee, right? If you lend out money and you charge extra, that is called interest, and you are going to be punished for charging interest. However, if you say, right, a person can pay, basically a person can pay someone else to lend the other person, that's not interest, because interest is only between the lender and the borrower, not a third party. Okay, next Mishnah on Daf 69. If the herdsman is raising adult animals, so the iska arrangement, right? This is a business arrangement. He gets half of the profit, but he does not get an extra wage because these adult animals can now work in his field. So if he's benefiting from these animals, that's seen as his wage, and that is enough. And again, it's based on the custom of the area. Sometimes they would split the profits of the offspring right away, and sometimes the herdsman has to raise them for a while, and then they can split the profits. Or the work of the mother compensates for the expenses of the offspring. And a landowner can charge more for rent of land based on a loan, but that's not seen as interest. So what does that mean? So the Gemara explains that a person can rent a field and then ask the landowner for money to help improve the field. And the borrower promises to pay more than the original deal. So the Gemara says this is okay because it's not interest, because the money is seen as an investment to improve the land, right? We all want the land to succeed, but he can't, this can't be done in a store or in a ship. But if you use the money to improve the store or the ship, then it would be okay. Okay, Daf 70 talks about the money of orphans, right? As we said, we're going to be extra lenient here. So you can lend the orphans money with interest. These orphans are minors. And again, we want to make sure that they are making money because they need money to survive. And the Gemara says, no, you can't lend right straight out with interest. But you can, right, let's say charge rent or make them liable, the person liable for damage, meaning that's not seen as interest. You can also, the Gemara says, you can invest the money of orphans if they get the profit, but they do not have any responsibility for the losses. Remember, we said the investor usually does take responsibility for losses. Here, there's a leniency with orphans that they do not accept responsibility for any of the losses. Now, right, if an adult asks for this kind of agreement, right, I'll invest, but I don't want to take any responsibility for any loss, we say that person is a rasha, right? They're a bad person, right? If an adult says, the investor says, I'm going to give you the money and I'm going to take full responsibility for any loss, this person is called a chassid, right? A pious person. But a regular business deal is you put in a certain amount of money, you have a certain amount of risk, right? And it's equal to the amount that you put in. And from here, the Gemara gives different business advice for orphans, how they should invest their money, how to make more money. And of course, this is all done in a court so that the orphans get the profit, and again, not the responsibility for the loss. Okay, last Mishnah for today on Daf 70. You are not allowed to accept a son barzel arrangement. We had this term before, actually, with a wife and a husband and the money she brings in to the relationship. Son barzel literally means iron sheep, but we would call it like an ironclad agreement. What's the agreement? And I'll explain it in a minute. But the Gemara says you're not allowed to have this arrangement with a Jew, but you can have it with a non-Jew. What's the agreement? The investor receives a share in the profits. The manager accepts all responsibility for the losses, right? Again, the investor does not take any responsibility. This is seen as a full loan, and therefore any profit is seen as interest. You're allowed to do this with a non-Jew, but not with a Jew. You can borrow and lend to non-Jews with interest, and right, non-Jews who live in your area, and a Jew can borrow money with interest from a non-Jew, and then he can transfer the loan to another Jew as long as the non-Jew knows about it. But a non-Jew who borrowed money with interest from a Jew, he can transfer the loan to another Jew without the original Jew knowing about it. But, right, again, if the Jew knows about it, then it is not okay. And the Gemara explains a little bit, right? If the non-Jew gives an animal to a Jew as son barzel with this agreement, so the offspring is not seen as the Jews, and therefore the concept of the firstborn doesn't apply because it's seen like it's owned by the non-Jew, right? Again, because the non-Jew accepted upon himself for some of the losses, it's seen as his, and therefore the laws, it's not seen as the Jew's animal, right? Our Mishnah says there's no loss, right? But here it's a little bit different. Again, it depends who takes responsibility for the loss, right? Again, the investor has the ability to take these animals at any point, and therefore it's seen as the non-Jews as well, right? If you charge interest, the Gemara tells us that in the end, all of your money is going to be taken away and given to the non-Jews. And again, you could pay a non-Jew to invest. You can pay a non-Jew interest, but you can't pay interest to a Jew. If you have to charge in, and then the Gemara says, and this is what we started with, right? If you have to charge interest to the non-Jew because you need to make a living, right? This is your only way of surviving. So then you're allowed to do it. But you can't be a money lender who charges non-Jews interest just to make millions of dollars. That's not okay. And you're going to end up learning the non-Jews way and get sucked in, and it is not a good practice. So with that, we are going to end. If I'm going to stop the recording, but if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Again, as I said, I am not a business maven. We have Zohar here if you have any accounting issues. Yes. But wishing everyone a Chodesh Tov. It's Rosh Chodesh Iyar. And next week we will have regular class, Be'ezrat Hashem, at regular time. And I will see you then.
Thank you so much for a wonderful share.